The bad news is that it printed in an awkward way, so you're going to have to do some flipping and to make it work. So for all of you who are watching at home, let me say hello. And Max, if you'd like to put up the PowerPoint. What is a shiur without a PowerPoint today? So before I get started, this is one of my more challenging jokes, but hopefully it'll work for everybody. So back in the medieval period, Jews were often expelled from the communities in which they lived. And so there was a Jewish community that had lived in this one town for hundreds of years, and there's a new king. And the new king says, look, I want the Jews to leave. And the Jews said, look, we've been here for hundreds of years, and at least give us a chance. And the king said, well, I'm a master of symbolic logic. So if anybody can beat me in a duel of symbolic logic, then you can stay. So of course they went to the rabbi, and the rabbi said, well, that's very, very kind, but the king said that if I lose, then whoever loses, they'll chop off their hands. And I really, I don't think I would lose, but heaven forbid. So then they went to the chazan, and the chazan said, oh, thank you for the honor. You could have asked me first. But heaven forbid I should lose. And so down for every learned person until they came to the shamus, the caretaker, Moish. And Moish said, I'll do it. And they said, Moish, what do you know about symbolic logic? And Moish said, leave it to me. So the next day, the Jewish community was at one side of the town square. I've been in towns like this in Poland before. And the king and the soldiers were on the other side. And the king starts out like this. And then Moish goes like this. The king goes like this. Moish goes like this. And then the king takes a chalice of wine and a wafer. He drinks the wine, he eats the wafer. Moish reaches into a bag, grabs an apple, bites into it. With that, the king threw up his hands, said, I could never defeat this master of symbolic logic. And nobody knew what had happened. So the soldiers all gathered around the king, and they said, Your Majesty, what happened? And the king said, this is a true master of symbolic logic. I said, God is everywhere. He said, God is right here. I made the sign of our faith, the Trinity. He said, but God is one. And then I took the wine and the wafer, the symbols of communion, and I drank and I ate. He took an apple, he bit into it, a symbol of Adam, that we're all descended from Adam and Eve. At that point, I realized they could never defeat him. The Jews gathered around and said, Moish, what happened? Moish said, it was easy. The king says, get out of town. I said, we're staying right here. The king said, I got you outnumbered 3-1. I said, any one of us can meet 3 of you. But Moish, the last symbol, what is it? Moish said, no. He started eating his lunch, I started eating my lunch. So why do I tell this story, besides the fact that I like to tell stories? It's that what's important about the story is the detail, and that the symbols had different contexts, and that when you're studying Torah, when you're doing deep Torah learning, it's very important. The methodology that we're going to talk about today is what a biblical scholar would call intertextual criticism. And when I was in yeshiva in Israel, my teacher, Judy Klitschner, this is based on her books, Subversive Sequels, we would look at a text and we'd find the kushia. Now, what is a kushia? A kushia is when you look at a text and something doesn't quite make logical sense. So in our story here, it's going to say, Noah was a righteous man. He was blameless in his age. Well, what's the inconsistency there? Somebody tell me what's the inconsistency in that. Just shout it out if you can figure it out. Raise your hand, Kate will come to you. What's the inconsistency with Noah was blameless in his age? Yeah.
Wait.
There you go.
No one on Zoom can hear you if you don't wait for me.
Thank you, Kate. In his age makes it a subjective thing. You have to compare it to other people that were around at the time.
Great. And
They might not have been so righteous.
Yeah, maybe in a different age. So what we have is, the kushya is, how would he be in a different age, in his age? Now, how we interpret it, that takes us to another level. So the first level is pshat, the storyline. And we're going to kind of work on the second level today, which is remez in the mystical system of the Pardes for studying Torah, which is the hint, how it compares to other stories in the Bible. Then there's drash, which is how it relates to Jewish history, and sod, which is either the mystical or the existential level. So, another example, which is going to work for us today, is that at the end of the story of Noah, we're going to see that Noah releases a dove. Now, the word for dove in Hebrew is Yonah. Does that sound familiar to anybody? Oh, Jonah, yeah. So they're both stories that are dealing with water. They're both stories dealing with corrupt human beings. And they both have this Yonah, a dove. And so what Judy suggests is that there's a primary story and then a subversive sequel that the story is looked at in a different way later on in the Torah. But the rules for the game is that it has to have a connection with the same words in Hebrew, okay? It's not the same words in English, so it's not the word lonely or alone, but you have to have livado, which is alone. It's a different shiur. So that's what we're going to be looking at today. So let's look at the prelude. And Kate, we need someone to read the prelude for us. We're on this page that says prelude, for those of you viewing at home. Anybody like to read the prelude? Great.
Genesis 5. When Lamech had lived 182 years, he begot a son, and he named him Noah, saying, "This one shall console," or give us relief, "us for our work, for the hard labor of our hands, and for the soil that has condemned." After begetting Noah, Lamech lived 595 years, and he begot sons and daughters. The years of Lamech's life came to 777. Then he died. When Noah had lived 500 years, he begot Shem, Ham, and Japheth.
And the word in Hebrew is Adonai. I'll go on to chapter 6.
Oh, yeah, thank you. Yeah, when Adonai saw how great was the wickedness of human beings in the earth, that the direction of their thoughts was nothing but wicked all the time, Adonai regretted having made human beings on earth and was heartsick. So Adonai thought, "I will wipe the humans whom I created from off the face of the earth, the humans, and with them the beasts, the reptiles, the birds of the sky, for I rue the day I made them." But Noah found favor in Adonai's sight.
Great. So the thing that we're not going to look at today is a question would jump out is, what did they do that they were so wicked? We just don't have time to look at that question today. It's an interesting question to explore. It's really interesting to explore in Sodom and Gomorrah. And now, PowerPoint, we're going to go to the next one that begins, "This is the line of Noah." I apologize, I just couldn't get a picture in on this page. And if someone would like to read the first two paragraphs. There you go, Kate.
The earth became corrupt before God. Oh, should I start? This is the line of
Yeah,
Noah.
this is the line, yeah.
Noah was a righteous man. He was blameless in his age. Noah walked with God. Noah begot 3 sons, Shem, Ham, and Japheth. The earth became corrupt before God. The earth was filled with lawlessness. When God saw how corrupt the earth was, for all flesh had corrupted its ways on earth, God said to Noah, I have decided to put an end to all flesh, for the earth is filled with lawlessness because of them. I am about to destroy them with the earth. Make yourself an ark of gopher wood. Make it an ark with compartments, and cover it inside and out with pitch. This is how you shall make it. The length of the ark shall be 300 cubits, its width 50 cubits, and its height 30 cubits.
Should go on and finish the page. That'd be great.
As for me, I am going to bring the floodwaters upon the earth to destroy all that lives under the heavens, all that has the breath of life in it. Everything on earth shall expire. With you, though, I will establish my covenant. Go then into the ark, you, your wife, your sons, and their wives with you, and take 2 each of every living creature, of all flesh, into the ark, male and female, to keep them alive along with you. Every type of bird, every type of beast, every type of creeping thing, let 2 of each come to you to keep them alive.
Hey, thank you. And Kim's going to be our mic person for the moment. And if you flip the page, you'll see our first questions, which is, what does it mean when it says that Noah was blameless in his age? So do you think Noah was universally good, that he would be good in any age, or was he only situationally good? He was good in his age, but if you took him and put him in another time period, he wouldn't be so good. And the other questions you see below, how do you think environment affects how a person's character is shaped? And how can we help people transcend a difficult environment? So I'll throw it open to you all for your questions, comments, and rebuttals. Wave over, come on. Great.
I'm actually going through this right now. There's a conversation going on at work about old terminology that we can't really use anymore. And somebody complained about the term whitelist versus whitelisting and blacklisting, right? And when in computers in the 1980s, you would talk about master and slave, right? Mm-hmm. You can't, that's, I mean, obviously, right?
Yeah.
And I listened to an old radio station here with old music from the big band era, and there's a lot of racial stereotypes. And they actually make an announcement on the radio station, please remember that these songs were written in a different time, and that what is acceptable back then may not be acceptable now. And so it's just seeing so much of this stuff that's in our day-to-day that's been acceptable for as long as I've been around, and now just to get hit in the face with reality, to go back into the roots. So I guess my point is that these are no longer valid ways of expressing oneself, but they certainly were in another time.
Great, thank you. Yeah, and you'll note that the Torah translation that I used in the new materials that I prepare, I work from the Women's Torah Commentary, which is an egalitarian translation. That's why it says Adonai and not Lord. Any other thoughts about Noah? Do you think Noah would be good in another situation, or Noah was just good here, or how does our environment affect what happens to us? So here's a little secret. I've done 3 8-day silent meditation retreats. I can be quiet longer than anybody. Yeah, go ahead, Bill.
Well, the statement is made that Noah walked with God. That doesn't sound relative to me. Mm-hmm. If you walk with God, not the God of the 19th century or the God of the 12th century. Walk with God. So that tells me that Noah is a righteous person and would have been in any era.
Yeah, great. Thank you. Thank you. Any other thoughts about that? Yeah. Yeah, the Hebrew says hitalech, which is a repetitive cyclical motion, which is a neat thing. Yeah.
Yeah. So I'm curious about the word blameless. It doesn't say he was good or he was altruistic. It says he was blameless, and I'm wondering, I don't know exactly what the translation is, but it's a different word than you would usually use to describe someone. So it's like someone has to be blamed for something, but it wouldn't be Noah here. And I'm curious about that.
Yeah, the way that I would translate it is the word is tamim, which means he's innocent. Like it's someone who is like the children on Passover, the wise, the foolish, the wicked, and the innocent. So it doesn't even know enough to do harm to others. Is how I might translate it. But that's a great point. If I was, and I'll delve into it next time I prepare this, there are many different translations, and each translation is an interpretation.
Yeah, I've always seen it as blameless, though, so I'm curious about that word choice.
Yeah.
That's all I have to say about it.
Yeah, it's saying that he's pure.
Okay.
Yeah, is what it means. Yeah, go ahead. Wait till Kim comes around. And we're trying to spread out the hand raise to make Kim walk the most. There we go. Kay has it. Kay, right over here.
I believe the story of Noah is a story about relationship between humans and divinity, with God. And that's a basic core of this story.
Cool, thank you. So flip the page, and I'm going to read this one because it's a bit nuanced. And this is how the rabbis responded to it. Two different opinions. In his generation, Rabbi Yochanan pointed out, but not in other generations. However, Reish Lakish disagrees. The verse intimates that even in his generation he was righteous, so much the more so in other generations. Rabbi Yochanan's view may be illustrated by a parable of a jar of wine stored in a cellar filled with jars of vinegar. In such a place, the fragrance of the wine is sensed because of the vinegar's fumes. In other place, the fragrance might not be sensed at all. So he was just righteous in his generation because he was surrounded by vinegar. Reish Lakish says, it's like a vial of fragrant oil lying in excrement. The rabbis get even more graphic at times. Its fragrance is sensed in such surroundings, but so much the more so amid the spices. So, my takeaway from this particular piece is that it's two different ideas about humanity. One, and that's what we're going to see as we go on today, one that humanity can be shaped and people can grow, and the other is that they're just limited to their circumstance. So here's another question, and we'll see this when we look at at Jonah. What do you think is God's view of humanity? Why do you think God didn't warn people? There's no warning. There's no hey, guys, I'm going to give you another chance. Any thoughts about that? Okay. Oh, there we go.
So God here is it's an interesting kind of justice. It's like you're bad, you're gone. Again, I can think about Sodom Gomorrah, like pretty much the same thing. They're bad, they're gone. Abraham had to actually quarrel with God to save them. But In this case, there's no one to argue on their behalf, and God decides to save possibly the only one worth saving.
Yeah. Yeah, Noah's just there and not doing anything. And Kay, I'm sorry, Aviv, that leads to the next page. Let's flip over. And because we have to use the same Hebrew word, and the Hebrew word is the root shin chet tav, which appears in the story of Noah and in the story of Abraham. So if you'd like to read, suppose there are 50 innocent people. Aviv, he's right in front of you. There you go.
Suppose there are 50 innocent in the city. Will you indeed sweep away the place and not spare it for the sake of the 50 innocent who are in its midst? Far be it from you to do such a thing, killing innocent and wicked alike, so that the innocent and the wicked suffer the same fate. Far be it from you. Must not the judge of all earth do justly? And Adonai said, if I find 50 innocent people in Sodom, I will pardon the whole place for their sake. Again, Abraham spoke, look now, let me undertake to speak up to my Eternal, though I am but dust and ashes. What if the 50 innocent are 5 short? Will you destroy the whole city because of 5? God answered, if I find 45 there, I will not destroy it.
So how has the view of humanity in the Torah changed between the two stories? And how has God's reaction changed between the two stories? Yeah, go ahead, Kay. Oh, yeah.
To prove with us, God changed his mind.
Mm-hmm.
And here this story, God, a lot of times we think that whatever God said, it will be done and it's finished. But through our conversation with God and prayer with God and tefillin and all these matters that we do, it's obviously God changed his mind.
Yeah. Yeah, God was able to say that. And so what does this say about humanity? Possibility for repentance. You know, I think it was the Million Mom March. It started with 10 people, and just the power of 10 that can organize. So flip to the next page, and this is going to be a little aside. This is a passage from the Zohar, and again, I'm going to do the things that are not straight from Torah. And so the Zohar is the most significant work of Jewish mysticism. Written in the Middle Ages, there are two opinions. The historians will say it's written in Spain. The people who are classically observant will say it was written by Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai in Israel in the 2nd century. And so here, the Zohar is comparing Noah, Moses, and Abraham. Rabbi Yochanan said, come and see the difference between the righteous among the Jews after Noah and Noah. Noah did not defend his generation, nor did he pray for them, as Abraham did. When God told Abraham that he would destroy Sodom and Gomorrah, immediately Abraham began to pray in front of God until he asked of God if 10 good people were found. Would God forgive the entire city because of them? Sometime later, Moses came, when God said to them, they have turned aside quickly from the way I have commanded them. Immediately, Moshe stood and prayed. It is said that Moses was willing to give his soul for the people in both this world and the next. So I don't like the ethnocentric part about saying that projecting Jews above the peoples. But what it shows in the Torah is a progression, that we go from Noah, who didn't speak, to Abraham, who challenged God Well, like I say, no, what's God going to do? God chose Abraham. How much trouble could Abraham really get in? You know, you're my favorite. How much, to Moses, who said, look, if you're going to destroy the people, you have to take me with them. And so that's another example of juxtaposing three different stories to convey a meaning in the Torah. Great. If somebody would just go on and read the dove connection, which I already made.
The dove connection. Genesis 8. 40 days later, Noah opened the ark's window that he had made and sent out the raven, who went winging to and fro, waiting for the water to dry up from upon the earth. Then he sent out the dove to see whether the water had eased from off the surface of the soil. But the dove could not find a resting place for her foot, so she returned to the ark, for still there was water on the face of the earth. He reached out his hand and took her, bringing her back to him into the ark.
Now, the part, and this is a part that we don't often focus on, is that Noah first sent out a dove, a raven, and the raven didn't come back. Rabbi Mark Gelman, in a wonderful book called "Does God Have a Big Toe?" It's a collection of midrashim, modern midrashim that he came up with, and he has this wonderful story about the raven and the dove. So now, here's the other thing. This is what I think of as the post-traumatic stress of Noah, and this again is a story that's not often read, and we're going to see a parallel with Jonah. So if I could invite someone to read this next story, the fall of Noah.
Genesis 9. Noah, a man of the soil, was the first to plant a vineyard. He drank of the wine and grew drunk, and exposed himself under his tent. Ham, Canaan's father, saw his father's nakedness, and outside told his two brothers. Shem and Japheth took a cloak and put it on both their shoulders. They walked backward and covered their father's nakedness. Facing backward, they did not see their father's nakedness. Noah awakened from his wine and understood what his youngest son had done to him. So he said, "Damned be Canaan. To his brothers he shall be the basest of slaves." After the flood, Noah lived 350 years. The years of Noah's life came to 950, then he died.
Saw his nakedness is a euphemism in the Torah for sodomy, for sexual relations, in this case for homosexual relations. So why do you think the Torah put this in? I like to say you could have the Torah written on your computer. You could highlight this story. You could push delete. Nobody would know it was gone. Why is it here? What are your answers? I have this incredible gift for asking questions that nobody feels a need to respond to.
Well, I think that this is many years later, they had to justify why Amalek is a really, 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 again, this is not Amalek, Canaan. It's a bad people. So I think it's it's later to justify why you should not intermingle with Canaan, why you should not. And let's remember that Joshua getting into the land of Israel, and later we can see it actually also in Sefer Dvarim and also even in Shmot. So you can see that there's a certain line that says you shall not mix up with Canaan, and so I think it's to justify.
So this is sort of, you see it as being inserted later on to justify the taking the land from the people of Canaan. Great.
I think it just shows that Noah was a human being that had some faults. and this was revealed, his weaknesses.
How do you think Noah felt after living through the flood? We have people now that are living through floods and disasters.
I assume question 2 then on the traumatic experiences, events. I was thinking back to just this past Saturday. We had the horrific 20th year anniversary of 9/11, and like a lot of it's caught stuff on television and the personal stories. And I was struck how people during that, particularly in the Twin Towers in New York, would go in and save other people. They did what they had to do and all that they could do, not even thinking their life's at risk. There was a story about the one fellow that got down and his shoes were practically gone, and somebody, a stranger, just took him up to his apartment and got him a new pair of sneakers and said, we would do that in any kind of case. So I think that was, to hear those stories, it was extremely reassuring that, God, humanity is still alive. That was my thought, at least.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, this flag over here, which we just put up, has the names of all of those who lost their lives through the 9/11 tragedy. There was somebody over here. Was there another comment? Yeah. I think we kind of read through the story quickly, and we see that that Noah's response was, it was like a little more than he could bear. And that's one interpretation of why this particular story is present. As an aside, I don't drink. I just don't have a taste for alcohol. I was once interviewing for a job in Napa Valley, and each phase of the interviews was at a different vineyard. It was like really interesting. I learned about microclimates and Jewish vintners and the kosher vineyard in Napa. He likes to say I make a very good wine that happens to be kosher, that had been served at the White House. But and there was actually a book about Jewish vintners. So now we're going to look at the story of Jonah, and we're going to look and see how the story is different. And so if someone would like to read from verses 1 through 11, this is nice big print. That's why we're going to go there. Another volunteer. Oh, there we go.
Again. Jonah, the journey begins. Sounds like a movie. The word of the Eternal came to Jonah, a son of Amittai. Go at once to Nineveh, that great city, and proclaim judgment upon it, for their wickedness has come before me. Jonah, however, started out to flee to Tarshish from the Eternal's service. He went down to Joppa and found a ship going to Tarshish. He paid the fare and went aboard to sail with the others to Tarshish, away from the service of the Eternal. But the Eternal cast a mighty wind upon the sea, and such a great tempest came upon the sea that the ship was in danger of breaking up. In their fright, the sailors cried out, each to his own god, and they flung the ship's cargo overboard to make it lighter for them. Jonah, meanwhile, had gone down into the hold of the vessel, where he lay down and fell asleep. The captain went over to him and cried out, How can you be sleeping so soundly? Up, call upon your God. Perhaps the God will be kind to us, and we will not perish. Is that the end? The men said to one another, Let us cast lots and find out on whose account this misfortune has come upon us. They cast lots, and the lot fell on Jonah. They said to him, Tell us, you who have brought this misfortune upon us, what is your business? Where have you come from? What is your country, and of what people are you? I am a Hebrew, he replied. I worship the Eternal, the God of heaven, who made both sea and land. The men were greatly terrified, and they asked him, What have you done? And when the men learned that he was fleeing from the service of the Eternal, for so he told them, they said to him, What must we do to you to make the sea calm around us? For the sea was growing more and more stormy.
It goes on a little bit more.
Okay. He answered, "Heave me overboard, and the sea will calm down for you, for I know that this terrible storm came upon you on my account." Nevertheless, the men rowed hard to regain the shore, but they could not, for the sea was growing more and more stormy about them. Then they cried out to the Eternal, "Oh, please, Eternal, do not let us perish on account of this man's life. Do not hold us guilty of killing an innocent person. For you, O Eternal, by your will, have brought this about." And they heaved Jonah overboard, and the sea stopped raging. The men feared the Eternal greatly. They offered a sacrifice to the Eternal, and they made vows.
Wow. So now, how is this different? There are a lot of key differences between this and the story of Noah. So what are some of the differences in this story? Yeah. Okay. Oh, let the mic come around. Yeah.
In both stories, God is commanding to either one of them. One of them listen, and the other one does not.
Mm-hmm.
Opposite. He doesn't listen.
Yeah, great.
Well, one difference is the sailors. I mean, these are pretty good guys, right? They don't want to kill him, and they even ask for forgiveness, even when Jonah, tells them, "Throw me into the sea." There's like, "Don't hold us accountable." They know they're doing something wrong,
Mm-hmm.
which shows a moral side.
Yeah. So how is this different than the people in the age of Jonah?
The people in the age of Jonah were in Noah.
In the age of Noah, yeah. I'm
In
sorry.
the age of Noah were, they were all, not good according to the Torah. So
Yeah, yeah. So here, the people have become self-reflective. They know, they know right from wrong, and they're conscious of it. What's another thing that kind of jumps out about this section, or at least jumps out to me? Yeah, go ahead.
It struck me that it's similar to Sodom and Gomorrah, where here Jonah was the person not listening to God, and the sailors were blameless, yet the ship was going to go down, just like Sodom and Gomorrah. It didn't matter if there were righteous among them.
Yeah, so it's like an inverse of Sodom and Gomorrah.
No, I feel like it's the same,
Uh-huh.
because unless, I think it was Abraham was trying to find 45 people. At first, it was the same, right?
Yeah.
Because it was only when Abraham said, "If I can find 50
Yeah.
people,"
Uh-huh.
and then it was different.
Yeah, yeah. And so here, the people, there were enough righteous people, and the boat was saved.
Only because they got rid of the
They got rid of
non-righteous.
Jonah, yeah. But they were self-reflective about it, yeah. Great, yeah, come on around. Oh, over here.
Thank you, Kim. So I think one of the interesting points is the magnitude of the destruction. In Noah, it's humanity. Sodom and Gomorrah, it's a city. And then we get to Jonah, we're dealing with just the ship.
Mm-hmm.
So the scale and magnitude of destruction is considerably reduced and far more focused.
Yeah.
As we go deeper into the Torah.
Great, thank you. Kate, what time am I supposed to finish? I have 5 minutes? 4 o'clock, okay. 17 minutes, okay, great. We have a comment from Bill over here.
So it's really more of a question. You mentioned, you used the word inverse, and it struck me that in the tale of Jonah, I have to ask myself, what would have happened if Jonah had not volunteered to go overboard? Because he was the one blameful person, with everybody else on the ship presumably blameless, which is the inverse proportion from what you had in Sodom and Gomorrah. Would God have destroyed the whole ship because Jonah was on it?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, that's great. Yeah, so Jonah, even though he fled, he had a conscience. Yeah, that's great because that's a character development, even though it's not one that we like because he's just like sleeping in the hold. But we can attribute that to people under stress just want to sleep all the time. Great. So I want to keep an eye on the time. So we're going to jump to Jonah in Nineveh, and now we see the big turnaround. So if someone would like to read the next couple of pages.
Jonah in Nineveh. The word of the Eternal came to Jonah a second time. Go at once to Nineveh, that great city, and proclaim to it what I tell you. Jonah went at once to Nineveh in accordance with the Eternal's command. Nineveh was an enormously large city, a 3 days' walk across. Jonah started out and made his way into the city, the distance of 1 day's walk, and proclaimed, 40 days more, and Nineveh shall be overthrown. Keep going. The people of Nineveh believed God. They proclaimed a fast, and great and small alike put on sackcloth. When the news reached the king in Nineveh, he rose from his throne, took off his robe, put on sackcloth, and sat in ashes. And he had the word cried through Nineveh, by decree of the king and his nobles, no man or beast, a flock or herd, shall taste anything. They shall not graze, and they shall not drink water. They shall be covered with sackcloth, man and beast, and shall cry mightily to God. Let everyone turn back from his evil ways and from the injustice, of which he is guilty. Who knows but that God may turn and relent? He may turn back from his wrath so that we do not perish. God saw what they did, how they were turning back from their evil ways, and God renounced the punishment he had planned to bring upon them and did not carry it out.
Great. So now it's laid out before you. So, what are the differences in the way that humanity is viewed in the story? What are the differences between God in the story? How do you see the contrasts? And remember that so one of my professors at HUC said, whether it's God or human beings, but he was saying of human beings, whoever wrote the Torah was really smart. And what you see is that throughout the Torah, there are these different, over and over again, linguistic connections between one story and another, and that, let's say that God or a redactor or an editor is laying pieces next to each other, and in that way has a core story that they're starting with, and then is laying down a second story, and then is trying to convey an overall global meaning by how the stories are juxtaposed to each other. So that first juxtaposition we saw was Noah, Abraham, Moses, about what are our expectations about justice. So what do we learn from the juxtaposition? I love using juxtaposition. I try to use it 3 times in a sentence sometimes. What do we learn from how these stories are laid out now against each other? About humanity, about what we take away from this on Yom Kippur. Go around,
Kay. I really believe that from the beginning, Adam and Eve, we have tried so hard to get to know God. And God has created these people like Noah, like Moses, King David, and people like that to tell us about himself, who he is. He has created King David. So these people have become samples in our life, and slowly we get to know God. And right now, we do not know God that well, but we know God more than Adam. And it took thousands of years to evaluate that. And all these stories is about God teaching us who He is and what is He capable of doing.
Yeah, great, thank you. Right behind you and then up in front.
Well, if you look at the arc of the stories, you start with humanity's not even worth saving. There's no chance. And the next time, it's that humans have a chance to evolve. And then the third time, it's they actually take it upon themselves and do change without, with minimal prompting. So it shows, I guess, as I'm listening to it, that human beings not only are worthy of saving, but they are capable of changing themselves.
Great, thank you. Yeah, come around to the front.
So that last comment was very much in line with what I was going to say. I think it actually also could be interpreted as showing a sense that humans are evolving into the ability to have self-determination. And that as opposed to God simply saying, I've seen it and I decide it, it's more of and then to have some leaders who might have the conversation with God, that it evolves from that a leader with Moses having the conversation or Abraham to the entire society having the self-determination and the ability to address the edicts and the commands.
Great. Other thoughts about this? Yeah, Aviv.
I totally agree with the two comments here, and with Kate too, is that again there's a change in humanity, but I think that there's a change in God too. But I want to speak about the like Jonah. He's a reluctant prophet. I mean, he reminds me Moshe. Moshe also was a reluctant prophet. He didn't want to take on the job, and Jonah didn't want to take the job too. So he ran away. He fled. Then he fled to the sea. Even then, he said, you know what, throw me out to the water. I mean, he didn't volunteer to do anything about fleeing or running away from responsibility. Even here, the city was huge, 3 days walk. He walked 1 day. So he walked a little bit through the outskirts and then did whatever he did, and it worked. I don't think he believed it worked. I mean, he wanted to sabotage the mission by doing, you know what, I'll do that. He walked only 1 day. He didn't walk the whole 3 days of the city, but it worked. I think he's pissed off. He's pissed off at this point because, he has a certain mind and again, the reluctance against that mission. And this is the responsibility of receiving the mission. And again, Abraham argued. Moshe argued with God in the beginning because he reluctant to take on until God gave him the assurances and the support. And even later, he argued twice for the people of Israel, Egel Hazahav, and then later. So the leaders can argue with like the higher call, but argue for a good cause. And this is what I can see here. Jonah was trying to sabotage the mission, which is like the completely opposite example, which I think this is what we can learn here.
Yeah, great. So, to draw, like I said, the levels of learning Torah, it's called a pardes, which means, I think of it as an orange grove. But it's the garden of mystical contemplation. And Pshat is the storyline. Remez, this is a system by Joel Grishaver, is the hint, to me, the intertextual meaning. Drash is what the rabbis have said through the years. The Zohar passage I gave you was Drash. And then Sod can be Jewish mysticism, but also existential. So, when I was an undergraduate, I forget who wrote the article, but the article, it was in a leadership course and it was about managers who look at people as theory X or theory Y. Theory X said, you have to sit on top of people in order to get them to do their work. And theory-wise said people are, want to do a really good job and are self-actualized. I invented a third one, which I call the closet X. It's a person who's really an X, but thinks Y gets better results. Another system I learned recently talks about unilateral control versus mutual learning. Unilateral control, the leader says, I got all the answers. I know what's right, and essentially browbeats people. And mutual learning says we all have things to bring to the table. And they're based on different assumptions about people. Have been overweight, I've been thin, but throughout my life, when I was in 9th grade, before soccer was like soccer, I was the manager of the soccer team. The coach was the guidance counselor. And so I got to play 6th-string goalie, which meant that if we were either ahead by 10 or down by 10, I got to stand in front of the goal. But you know what? He saw that I wanted to be part of the team. And, as we're here on Yom Kippur, and we can think about who are the people that have, exhibited the story of Jonah view of the world, who are people that have exhibited the God of Noah view of the world. And the wonderful thing that we brought out is who are the people that we've known that have been self-reflective. So let me throw it out for a few more comments, and yeah, great.
Thank you, Rabbi, for putting these three stories together as one discussion, because I take a step back. Instead of looking at Noah or Abraham or Jonah, I look at the wickedness of the people and how did they get to be this way? And to me, that's an underlying theme that is really rubbing me raw during this discussion. Like, how did we get to this point that over time, and then again over time, and then again over time, we've placed ourselves in this situation? And I feel like even in today's world, are we again over time now with COVID? Again, you can point to a lot of different things. And to the gentleman's point about, 9/11 and the shoelace example about exemplifying that humanity is still alive. Like, I want to live in a world where the exception is that something bad happens, not the exception that, humanity is still alive.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. That's the great challenge and the great conundrum. Comment. Thank you.
I just kind of scanned ahead to the end of the Jonah story. And I think many people know that, but I didn't know the story about Noah, the aftermath story back to Noah and the raven and the dove. And it just really highlights for me just how imperfect are these human foils of God in Noah and Jonah. And I think that's just interesting.
Yeah. Yeah. So let's read the fall of Jonah just for the sake of completeness, as much as I've tried to avoid it. Kim, we're going to give you a turn to read. You don't want a turn to read? Okay. There we go. Just somebody will help Kim out so she doesn't have to read. There you go. Got it in the middle.
The fall of Jonah. This displeased Jonah greatly, and he was grieved. He prayed to the Eternal, saying, O Eternal, isn't this just what I said when I was still in my own country? That is why I fled beforehand to Tarshish. For I know that you are a compassionate and gracious God, slow to anger, abounding in kindness, renouncing punishment. Please, Eternal, take my life, for I would rather die than live. The Eternal replied, Are you that deeply grieved? Now Jonah had left the city and found a place east of the city. He made a booth there and sat under it in the shade until he should see what happened to the city. The eternal God provided a ricinus plant, which grew up over Jonah, to provide shade for his head and save him from discomfort. Jonah was very happy about the plant. Should I do the? Okay. But the next day at dawn, God provided a worm, which attacked the plant so that it withered. And when the sun rose, God provided a sultry east wind. The sun beat down on Jonah's head, and he became faint. He begged for death, saying, "I would rather die than live." Then God said to Jonah, "Are you so deeply grieved about the plant?" "Yes," he replied, "so deeply that I want to die." Then the Eternal said, "You cared about the plant, which you did not work for and which you did not grow, which appeared overnight and perished overnight. And should not I care about Nineveh, the great city, in which there are more than 120,000 persons who do not yet know their right hand from their left, and many beasts as well?"
Yeah, it's not a happy ending. And, I think what there is, though, well, actually, how do you see the way that God is between the beginning with the story of Noah and God at the end here? So at the beginning, God is just going to punish and wipe everything out. And then at the end, God wants people to repent, to change, and to grow. And even though there's continual falling back, human beings have that ability. I'll end with the last midrash. It's told in different ways. When God was going to create humanity, the angels protested, and the angels said, human beings are going to do such terrible things. They're going to pollute, they're going to destroy, they're going to harm each other. And God said, with the gifts that I give them, you see only the harm. They're going to heal, they're going to grow crops, they're going to be kind. The angel said, what's the difference? And God said, the difference is that angels, you are already holy, but human beings are going to make mistakes, they're going to grow, they're going to repent, and that's true holiness. Shalom ben Ramav, Shalom Aleinu, V'Yakol Yisrael, V'Yamru, Amen. Great. We move to Saul for our meditation program. Yeshua everyone. And the book is Subversive Sequels by Judy Klitschner. It starts at 4:30? Oh, Saul starts at 4:30. Talk amongst yourselves.